Title of this series will be in the comment section below. Please consider liking and subscribing. The story begins with our protagonist catching his breath, exhausted and in pain, thinking that he doesn't want to die. He tried his best to quickly escape, but his body was in so much pain, making him furiously wonder why it was only him going through this. He then tripped on his own feet and slammed onto the floor, which made him let go of his sword. He shakily tried to stand up while coughing and calling for someone to help him, but his body fell, and Takemichi Yoshido, a low-tier challenger, lay on the floor, hopelessly crying and begging for someone to help him. The ground, making the whole place shake. It then walked closer to him, and it was the elite demon. He shakily stood up to face the elite demon, wondering how miserable he was to be tormented and looked down upon. He then furiously asked if it was fun and if they were satisfied now. He then raised his sword and shouted that he would never give up, even if everyone laughed at him or that damned world abandoned him. He then dashes toward the elite demon while shouting that he had no choice but to move forward, but the elite demon just scratched him with its sharp claws even. Hurt, he was on the ground while the elite demon gathered its power in its palm. He tried to crawl away from the elite demon aiming at him. The elite demon stared at him and attacked him with its power, but the elite demon missed by an inch. When he noticed that the impact affected the floor, he knew that it was bad. Suddenly the ground shattered and he raised his hand to the elite demon, swearing that he would definitely become a strong challenger. He then falls crying, screaming on top of his lungs. Then the system informs him that he died. Magic Tower, an enigmatic structure beyond, a commonly known term for tower-like dungeons that suddenly appeared all over the world. The interior is like a world straight out of a game, with swords, magic skills, and monsters. The magic stones and treasures sleeping in the magic tower are traded at high prices, and those who sought treasures are called challengers. However, challenging the magic tower came with a risk to life. Even though it was like a game, death in the magic tower means death in reality. Yoshido, who had died, slowly opened his eyes and realized that he had died again. He slapped his face, knowing that this wasn't how things should go, while the system showed him that his death had been confirmed and his infinite revival skill had been activated, but the remaining time was 10 seconds. Infinite revival means that no matter how many times they die in the magic tower, it was a skill that could bring them back to life, but he was pissed, realizing that he had been fooled. After he graduated from high school, he lived a life filled with part-time jobs. However, when the magic tower appeared, he believed his life could change if he became a challenger. In order to win the competition, he tried to acquire a rare skill that no one else had. The one selling infinite revival was the merchant at the entrance of the magic tower. He withdrew all of his savings and even went into debt to purchase it, obtaining a body that doesn't die. However, as a death penalty, it applies a permanent debuff of 500 death. With infinite revival, each time he comes back to life, his abilities are reduced and he has died 4 times so far. The first time he died, his DEF was reduced by 50, was only 53, which brought him to the brink of death with a single blow earlier. The second time it was a reduction of 70% attack, and the third time it was a reduction of 250 health points. The negative effect received is random each time, and this time around his agility was reduced by 60. He laughed, knowing that if it kept getting rebuffed, only 1 point would be left to him. In the magic tower, the body structure changes based on their stats. If agility decreases, the body becomes heavier, and eventually they'll become unable to move. Once it happens, they won't be able to continue as a challenger. He ended up burdened with debt and stuck with a completely worthless skill. The system showed him that he would be revived, so he should get ready, but he was getting frustrated. He then woke up and saw himself on the destroyed ground, wondering if he had come back to life. He sits up and notices that his body feels heavy, thinking it is probably because his agility has become 1. He knows that with it, even moving around is going to be tough for him. He then looks around, wondering where that place is and if he was right that he has fallen to a lower floor. He felt something around him, making him wonder what that atmosphere was, because he had never heard of such a place in the lower levels. He then noticed something shining in front of him and was shocked to see that it was a skill stone, and it was golden, which means it was ultra rare. He knows that it can be sold for a high price, and it might be possible to repay the debt he took on. He tried to stand up, knowing that it was the only thing he was determined to bring back with him no matter what, and walked slowly to it, noticing that there were no monsters there, making him think that it was easy to win. Released a lot of holes. Suddenly it threw knives that hit him in every part of his body, including his eye, making him shout in pain and die for the 5th time. His infinite revival has been activated, and as his death penalty, a permanent debuff of 65 strength has been applied. He revived again and noticed that the place was a trap. Flinching his teeth, he declared that such a level shouldn't even think it could stop him. However, he noticed that he couldn't move his limbs and his muscle strength was reduced. Leaning on the wall in weakness, he pushed against it. Trap. Suddenly, a statue dragon emerged from underground, glared at him with its red eyes, and burned him alive. He died for the 6th time, revived once more, and as his death penalty, a permanent debuff of 250 was applied. He jumped to the side to avoid the continuous fire coming out of the dragon statue, and rolled to get closer to the rare skill. He was glad to see that he was closer, and realized that the reason for the narrow passage existence was to lure challengers enticed by rare skills and to effectively kill them with traps. Circumstances, no matter how many lives they have, they wouldn't be able to pass through. But he remarked that, unfortunately and surely, he was currently the weakest challenger in that magic tower, but he already had plenty of alternative lives. He then ran toward the rare skill, but then a huge blade fell above him, killing him for the 7th time. His infinite revival activated, and as his death penalty, his magic power was debuffed to 80 and his technical capabilities to 55. A moment later, he wondered how many times he had died because he had no in his entire body, and his vision was also blurry while getting debuffed by 90% vitality and 40% magic resistance as a penalty. Once more, he got pierced by a swarm of spears coming from underground and got debuffed by 60% intelligence, making him feel like his consciousness was about to fade away. However, he managed to grab the rare skill, thinking it was his victory, but he slowly collapsed, and the status asking him if he wanted to use the skill stone. A moment later, the system showed him that since there was no response, its automatic usage would be initiated, and he had acquired the skill inversion. After that, he woke up confused because he felt stronger, and his consciousness was clear. He wondered what was going on because he didn't feel the effects of the death penalties that were so harsh before. He then told the system to check his status, and he was shocked to see that the powerful negative effects he had been receiving until now had all turned into positives. The system then showed him that the skill inversion effect is to reverse all effects, including buffs, debuffs, and status abnormalities. He understood that. Received so far had been reversed into positive effects. However, he wondered when he had acquired such a skill. Then he saw the rare skill stone box and realized it was empty, making him wonder if it had been automatically used. He realized that his money was gone. However, he thought it might be a good thing because all the penalties of infinite revival are reversed by inversion. He'll get stronger every time he dies. With that power, as a challenger, he can now rise to the top and once more swears that no matter what, he will become the strongest challenger, earn a fortune, and acquire fame. He then looked behind him and saw the path with his blood spread everywhere, wondering if, in order to return home, he'd have to go that way. He knows that the instant death trap has returned to its pre-activated state, making him wonder if it will be activated again once he gets close, and if it means he'll be killed again by all those instant death traps. He panics and shouts that there is no way he can do it because even if he was revived, it is still insanely painful, and if he died too many times in a row, then definitely he'd go insane. He shivers upon remembering the pain he went through. He knows that his current stats are now double the original, thanks to his inversion skill, making him guess that he might be able to break through the traps head-on. He gulped in fear and faced the traps, knowing that there was no other way and he had no choice but to give it a try. When he had finished convincing himself, he dashed forward at speed, and suddenly a wall came out from underground. Then arrows were thrown at him, the arrows coming closer to him, and he sweats when one of the arrows is close to his eye. But he manages to dodge them using his agility, and successfully lands on the floor unharmed. He couldn't believe that he could see the traps in front of him, but he managed to avoid them at speed and run past them. Suddenly, The huge blade appeared above him to kill him instantly, but it was too slow for him now and he ran past it easily. He then bent down to get ready for the next trap and dashed toward the dragon statue that came out from underground. The statue opened its mouth to release fire, and he quickly opened his inventory and clicked his weapon out. He grabbed his sword and shattered the statue before it could burn him alive. Of knives was thrown in his direction. Calmly waiting for them to come near, he swung his sword around, blocking every one of the knives heading toward him. Finally, he sighed in relief when he passed all the traps. He was convinced that the combination of infinite revival, which gave him a death penalty each time it was activated, and inversion could indeed make him the strongest challenger. Looking up, he realized the sheer height of the hole he had fallen through before. He knew that if he were still his former self, climbing back up from there would have been. Rushingly moving to the side of the hole to ascend and finally managed to reach the floor where the elite demon resided. He saw the elite demon standing on the floor and apologized for making it wait. He then got down on the floor and the elite demon walked closer to him. He attempted to slash the demon with his sword, but the demon simply blocked it with its bare hand and threw him away. The elite demon positioned itself and he pointed his half-sword at it while asking if it wanted to try killing him again. The demon screamed in anger, but he calmly told it that he would play along. Demon and challenged it, asking how long it thought it could fight against his infinite lives with just one life of its own. He leaped towards the demon, and the demon met him with its claw, but he dodged it and remarked on the amazement of how his stats could increase similarly. Then he slashed the demon's hand, making it shout in pain. It tried to grab him, but he taunted it, saying its attacks no longer scared him. He then kicked the demon's neck to propel himself higher and struck it with all his might, sending it crashing into the wall hard. He landed on the floor believing in his victory, a strong power stunning him. Realizing the danger, he jumped aside to avoid it. The power surged directly towards him, and he saw the demon standing in anger afterward. However, the elite demon was shocked to find that its attack had missed. He mocked the demon, saying it was close, and then mused aloud that it didn't seem like any third-floor monster at all. He knew that the higher they went in the tower, the stronger the monsters became, but he was currently on the third floor where only weaker monsters should appear. He then dashed towards the elite demon to slash at its head with his sword. But he jumped backward when the demon unfurled its wings and attempted to crush him. Fortunately, he dodged in time and leaped higher. His stats significantly increased thanks to the death penalties. The elite demon soared up to meet him, launching attacks which he continuously blocked, commenting on its unusual strength for this floor and its unfamiliarity. He parried the demon's attacks with his sword, but the demon managed to slam him down to the floor. Still, he stood up and demanded to know what the demon was, receiving only a growl in response. He, demon, asserting that it was up against an exponentially stronger enemy, so they should settle the conflict once and for all. The elite demon then amassed power in both hands, and he noticed that this time it was using both of its hand. While looking at the demon, he was confused when the demon began to create a sword from its power, and he told the demon it's preparing something more formidable by shaping the power into a weapon, signaling its readiness to go all out. It screamed at him and launched a continuous assault with its newly formed weapon, which he tried desperately to dodge. He fled, cursing, but then the elite demon appeared behind him and struck, forcing him to slam onto the floor to block the attack with his sword, shattering the ground beneath them. He shouted to the elite demon with a grin that it was almost there, but then he noticed something shining beside him and saw the demon channeling power in its other hand. He cursed in despair and was hit in the head with the attack, causing his head to explode. Consequently, he died, and as a death penalty, his strength was debuffed by 40, but the inversion skill reversed it to a plus 40. He moved and was ready to attack it from behind, but the demon blocked his attack in time. Furious, he demanded to know how it dared to kill him. Then, leveraging his sword upward to gain force, he launched a series of continuous attacks on the confused demon, shouting that even though he could revive, it still hurt like hell. He noticed that, thanks to his strength buff, he could now push it back, yet it still wasn't enough. He then swung his sword into its body, eliciting a shout of pain from the demon. It retaliated by releasing a powerful energy and gathering it, shocking him. The demon then created a massive explosion, causing him to die and debuffing his agility by 60%, which was, fortunately, reversed by his inversion skill. Relieved that his agility had been buffed this time, he thought that with it, he could defeat the elite demon. He looked at the elite demon, who stared back at him, and told it that it had fought well, but it was not enough. He then dashed toward it at incredible speed, meeting it in the center. He managed to dodge its attack and with all his might slashed it in half. The demon stood still behind him, and his body began to shatter, then exploded. Him to believe it was the end. He declared that ultimately its life was limited and it had no chance of winning from the start. However, he was stunned to see it remained intact. Approaching it, he stated that whether they were bound for hell, another place, or even if it gained infinite lives, he hoped they would meet again. He expressed his desire for a fair fight next time, marking a moment of respect and anticipation for a future encounter. After that, he sat down on the floor, exhausted but glad that he managed to defeat the elite demon somehow. He was frustrated. Even though he had gotten stronger, he then looked at his cracked sword and was surprised to see it shattered. He realized he needed a sturdier sword and stood up, knowing that he should gather some money by collecting the magic stone so he could buy a new weapon. He then grabbed the magic stone scattered around the place. A moment later, he arrived at the magic tower, Hermes, which is on the first floor in the safe area. At the entrance of each floor of the magic tower, there is a section where monsters do not appear, known as the safe area, where adventurers can rest, obtain equipment and items. Additionally, there are often stalls in the safe area where they can buy and sell these items. After he bought a silver sword, he thought it wouldn't break easily, but was dismayed because its price was high, and most of the stones he had gathered earlier were almost gone. However, he convinced himself it was worth it because he was going to rise from there. While he was busy thinking of the sword as an initial investment, he heard people whispering behind him. He looked back and saw challengers laughing and whispering that he was fooled into buying infinite revival and pitying him. He understood that for them he was just a pitiful challenger who was sold a worthless skill. Angry, he told everyone that since they all knew about it, they should have told him before he got fooled. However, he knows infinite revival might just be considered trash to other challengers, but for him, who obtained the inversion skill, it was undoubtedly a god-tier skill. He smiled, thinking it was a skill that only he could master and wondered if it sounded kind of cool. Suddenly, he heard someone shout loudly, making him look back in panic, and saw a chubby man with his minions arrogantly asking if he didn't say he'd chow. The mid-boss room on the 5th floor. The chubby man then introduced himself as the Dominator Nagishi, making him frustrated when he realized who it was. Dominator is a title given to those who challenge the boss room at the top of the magic tower, and the magic tower disappears once the boss on the top floor is defeated. Those who defeat the boss can obtain powerful, unique equipment, and he knows that dominators are usually respected by ordinary challengers. However, Nagishi is somewhat arrogant, but he is surprised to see the person arguing with. Angrily asks Nagishi if she was right that he was just a person who happened to challenge a low-tier magic tower, and shouts to Nagishi that anyone could do the same. Shiromachi Yuri, who was level 13, tried to stop Sekiyamana, who was level 15, and told her that fighting wasn't a good idea. However, Mana told Yuri to let go of her, arguing that they had found the mid-boss room first. Mana also questioned Yuri if it was really okay to let that fake dominator snatch away their rewards for clearing the dungeon. Room were tempting, but the dangers were numerous, and leaving it to Nagishi and the others might be a good idea, which rendered Mana silent. Nagishi teasingly told Mana that it looked like the conversation was settled, which irritated Mana. Nagishi then proudly told them that they, as little girls, should just keep quiet and watch, boasting that the unique equipment bestowed upon him as a dominator, Aegis Mimesis, could block any attacks. Nagishi and his minions then teased the girls with laughter, but then someone called Arian Mana from behind. But Nagishi walked past the ladies and stared at him. Nagishi smiled teasingly and shouted that it was none other than Takemichi. Nagishi then told him that they say he got duped by that shady merchant into buying some worthless skill, and asked him if it was pathetic to be the one being exploited. However, he kept his silence inside. He then suggested to the ladies that they give the mid-boss to Nagishi and the others, which shocked Mana and led her to ask why even he agreed. He told Mana to calm down and explained that afterward, the three of them would challenge the boss room at the top with speed that even Nagishi and the others couldn't keep up with. Yuri asked him what he was saying, and he explained to them that he wasn't just saying random stuff, he had a proper plan to win. Nagishi was angered upon hearing his words and called him motherfudge in anger, but he just peeked back and saw Nagishi launching an attack on him while shouting at him not to say that he was bullying him. However, he easily dodged Nagishi's attacks. He then tripped Nagishi, causing Nagishi to be confused. Nagishi then fell to the ground. Nagishi's minions rushed to him and asked if he was okay, while Nagishi was confused. Had just happened. Nagishi then saw a shadow behind him, and he asked Nagishi how long he was going to keep rolling around. He then laughingly told everyone that since they were all there, he wanted to see Dominator Nagishi's great skill in challenging the mid-boss. He then turned around and asked them if they should go. A moment later, they arrived at the magic tower Hermes on the 4th floor. Mona called him from behind and, with a tone of worry, asked if it was safe to follow Nagishi. She explained that her concern stemmed from the fact that, as he knows, Nagishi isn't that strong. Yuri chimed in, sharing her worries as well, pointing out that the monsters they've encountered up to now have been really strong. If they get caught up in a fight, it could spell their end. However, he reassured them calmly that it would be fine. Mana and Yuri, challengers whom he met in the magic tower, are well aware that Mana is level 15 and Yuri is level 13, whereas he, being level 8, is comparatively weaker. Naturally, their concern was understandable, yet he knew that his current self, regardless of his level, had significantly increased in status. He was confident he could take them all down. Nagishi then teasingly called to him, saying it was fine to observe how they would defeat the mid-boss, but he'd be on his own against the lesser enemies. He couldn't believe Nagishi was being arrogant again, especially since he had seemed a bit scared earlier. He guessed that Nagishi had managed to pull himself together. Suddenly, the floor shook and they heard a loud growling sound. A monster then appeared behind Nagishi and attacked. But fortunately, Nagishi blocked the attack with his shield in time. Nagishi tried to attack the monster, but it jumped away in time and landed a distance away from Nagishi. The lizard man then stood up and growled angrily at them. Nagishi, undaunted, smiled, thinking that a single lizard man should be easy to handle. However, he warned Nagishi to wait, sensing that something was wrong. Suddenly, a swarm of eyes emerged from above them, and lizard men jumped down, surrounding them. Nagishi shouted in confusion, wondering why there were so many lizard men. The monster emerged from the darkness and walked toward them, while the lizard men bowed to it. It was the lizard commander, a superior species of lizard man, commanding the swarm. The lizard commander teasingly pointed its weapon at them, and the lizard men jumped at them to attack. Initially surprised, he then smiled excitedly. Mana shouts to Yuri that they should protect him, to which Yuri agrees. The two ladies then position themselves at his back and front to protect him. He shouts back, assuring them that it's okay and he can fight too, but Mana insists he not act tough in a situation like this. He looks at Mana, confused, and she explains that those opponents are completely out of his league, which frustrates him. Yuri then calls out to him, expressing concern over the danger, and advises him to fall back. While Mana, Yuri, and the men were fighting around him, he tried to convince them that he could also fight, reaching out to them. But he stopped, realizing everyone considered him just a liability, and wondered about the unsettling feeling he was experiencing. On the other hand, Nagishi was busy attacking lizard men when the lizard commander dashed, attempted to decapitate him. Fortunately, Nagishi blocked the attack in time but was thrown away instead. Nagishi managed to land safely, but accidentally activated a tile that was a trap. Suddenly, the floor beneath him collapsed, and he fell, cursing. The ladies called out his name wordly, but he questioned why he was the one falling and not Nagishi. He knows that the magic tower Hermes, as the name suggests, is filled with countless traps that challenge the adventurer's survival. However, traps like these no longer pose a threat to him. He noticed the floor he was about to slam, but managed to descend safely by jumping from pillar to pillar. He stood up, relieved to not have a single injury, but then turned around upon hearing a growl from behind and saw a swarm of lizard commanders. Realizing there were many lizardman commanders and no way to run, he questioned if they intended not to let him escape. He then pulled something from his storage, confronting the lizard commanders with the declaration that he had had enough and was tired of all these traps. The lizard commanders were stunned by his presence as he challenged them to come at him, stating it didn't matter how many there were, it would merely serve as a test for his new sword. He also warned them they would soon realize their mistake. Swiftly, he pierced through the swarm of lizard commanders, telling them they would witness the consequences of bringing him to that place and referring to them as shitty lizards. The lizard commanders began to encircle him, reminding him that all the lizard men present were of a higher rank, and until recently they were opponents he certainly couldn't have beaten. One of the lizard commanders leaped towards him to attack, but he calmly positioned his sword. He counterattacked with his sword, leaving the lizard commander stunned. He then swung his sword back and sliced the lizard commander in half while proclaiming that he could now defeat them. Two more lizard commanders jumped above him to strike him down, but he rolled in the air to dodge their attacks. When the two lizard commanders faced each other, he beheaded them with a single swipe of his sword while landing. Catching his breath, he sternly questioned the remaining lizard commanders about their hesitation, mocking them to try and kill him if they could, which only angered them further. However, he charged towards them and easily dispatched them with his sword. He realized that he could properly engage with that number of opponents, and that he was no longer the person who needed protection. After eliminating a swarm of lizard men, he addressed the retreating lizard men, asserting that they were frightened of death. He confessed understanding their fear as he had experienced death himself, which is why he promised to end them swiftly. The lizard commander, now shivering and crying in fear, witnessed his resolve. A moment later, after taking a deep breath from finishing off all of them, he noticed a staircase leading to another floor. He approached the stairs, knowing it was time to ascend from there. After a considerable journey to the stairs, the door on the fourth floor opened, and he stepped inside. Exhausted from the repetitive cycle of climbing up and tumbling down floors, he was met with astonishment by the ladies who rushed to his side. Yuri, with evident concern, approached him to check for any injuries, her inspection revealing none, which made her sigh in relief. She expressed her relief and her desire to have been of assistance, lamenting her inability to find any paths leading downward. Turned, questioned the plausibility of his solo journey, inquiring if he had encountered any monster attacks along the way. Surprised by their reaction, he reassured them that there were no issues, concealing the fact that he had slain a swarm of lizardmen commanders on another floor. Curious about the fate of Nagishi and the others, he inquired after them. Yuri hesitated, but Mana disclosed that after his descent into the hole, she managed to fend off a group of lizard men. Meanwhile, Nagishi, presuming him dead, hastened towards the boss room, quoting the irony that Nagishi, the trigger of the trap, remained unscathed while he suffered the fall. He, however, urged her not to dwell in anger, reminding her that Nagishi's behavior was typical, turning to Mana and Yuri with earnest gratitude for their concern. He elicited a puzzled yet warm smile from both ladies. With a bashful demeanor, he suggested they expedite their pursuit, hinting at the possibility of catching up with Nagishi and the others. However, his urgency turned to shock upon noticing a lizard man lurking behind the ladies. About its association with the creatures in the G-sheet, and the others had failed to vanquish. The situation escalated quickly as the lizard commander lunged at Yuri. In a frantic attempt to protect her, he called out her name while reaching to intercept. As Yuri raised her gaze, the lizard commander launched an attack with its sword. He ceased his run upon realizing it might be too late, then bent down and leapt, fortuitously blocking the lizard man's attack with his sword just in time. Yuri, taken aback by his sudden appearance, watched as Mana engaged the lizard commander. Leave it to her. She then slashed the lizard commander's chest with her dagger and looked back, warning him of the danger, but he merely sighed, sheathing his sword back into his inventory. Yuri awkwardly approached him, expressing her gratitude for the rescue. He shyly acknowledged that he was glad to have arrived in time. Amidst their awkward conversation, Mana, observing them with a smile, inquired how he managed to counter the attack. With a smirk, he suggested that perhaps he could indeed be useful, asserting that he was no longer merely dead weight. Moments later, they reached the magic tower. Hermes' fifth floor, while the two ladies engaged in conversation behind him. He checked his status and discovered a remarkable increase of 2 levels following his confrontation with a multitude of lizardmen commanders. He recognized that the enhancement in his status wasn't due to a buff or debuff, indicating that it wasn't subject to reversal. He also noted a significant improvement in his stats, pondering the magnitude of this increase given the nature of his recent battles. He observed that the increase in his ATK from the inverted, with a modest increase of 2% from his level ups, leading him to conclude that the synergy between the death penalty and inversion was profoundly powerful. Suddenly, Yuri's call drew his attention forward, where he saw the room of the 5th floor mid-boss. Mana shared that the magic tower Hermes is believed to encompass 10 floors, placing them at the midpoint of the tower. Given that the conquest of the tower had commenced not long ago, Yuri and she were the pioneers in uncovering this room. However, upon returning to the 1st floor to strategize for the battle, they found themselves. Negishi, Mana shouted in anger, exclaiming that just thinking about the situation infuriated her. Yuri attempted to pacify Mana once more, and he informed them that Nagishi and his group should be just ahead. He pushed the door open, imparting that no amount of preparation or strategy could fully anticipate a mid-boss's challenge, underlining the seriousness required. As he stepped inside, a man was suddenly thrown into the air, unnoticed by him until it was too late. The man crashed against the wall with a hard slam, but fortunately, remained alive, turning. Forward, Nagishi noticed their arrival. He acknowledged his survival and directed attention to the mid-boss guarding the room. The Orc Lord, enraged, leaped towards Nagishi in attack. He called out to Nagishi with concern, but Nagishi dismissively assured him that he required no concern from his likes. As the Orc Lord brought down its axe, Nagishi blocked the strike with his shield. Boasting that an attack of such caliber couldn't penetrate his Aegis mimesis, Nagishi managed to repel the Orc Lord's axe, causing the creature to kneel from imbalance. Nagishi. A group battle with the lizardmen caught him off guard with a surprise attack, but in a one-on-one confrontation, he had no intention of losing. Nagishi then cautioned him not to look away, promising to demonstrate that he was on a completely different level compared to small fry like him. Yuri approached the man who had been thrown to inquire if he was okay, to which he replied that, somehow, he was. The man then marveled at Nagishi's prowess, noting that despite being sent flying by just one attack, Nagishi stood unflinching, the shield to block the attack. Nagishi remained steadfast, his footing pierced into the floor from the force of the Orc Lord's blow, yet he teased the creature with a smile, provoking it into a furious scream. The Orc Lord then lifted its axe, gathering force for a series of powerful directional swings at Nagishi. Exhausted and catching its breath, the Orc Lord was taken aback when Nagishi mocked the true power of a mid-boss, teasingly questioning if a creature like it posed any real challenge, as the Orc Lord persisted in his futile attempts to strike Nagishi. Distance, speculated on the shield's origin, presumably a reward from a boss within the magic tower, and its unique power. He acknowledged that Nagishi's personal stats might not be exceptional, but the shield enabled Nagishi to fend off the mid-boss's attacks effortlessly. With another attack from the Orc Lord, Nagishi nonchalantly remarked on the simplicity of its tactics. He then used his shield to push the Orc Lord back, signaling his minions to engage. They swiftly attacked the Orc Lord's flanks, causing it significant pain. Leap above the Orc Lord, scolding it for its vulnerability and forcefully striking its head with his shield. The Orc Lord, overcome with pain, fell defeated. Nagishi then turned, mockingly inquiring how the spectacle was received, boastfully crediting the victory to the true power of a challenger. He smiled, acknowledging the significant advantage conferred by unique equipment. Nagishi, delighted by the acknowledgement, laughed off the suggestion that they, as lesser challengers, could have managed to defeat a mid-boss, urging them to show gratitude. Great Nagishi. At that moment, another man urgently pointed out something behind Nagishi, urging him to look at the astonishing sight. Nagishi turned, only to find himself shocked by the presence of a huge treasure chest. Nagishi, overcome with excitement, rushed to the treasure chest, proclaiming the certainty of finding a super rare item within. Embracing the chest, he declared it superior even to the one that had contained the Aegis Mims's But then Yoshido, haunted by the memory of previous traps and puzzled over the presence of such a remarkable chest as a reward for a 5th floor. Mid-boss. He called out to Nagishi, urging caution, aware that even a moment's inattention could trigger the tower's notorious traps. As Nagishi opened the treasure chest, disappointment struck when he found it empty. This frustration quickly turned to shock as a massive magic circle materialized above them. He shielded his face, eyes reflexively shutting as a bright light enveloped them. In mere seconds, they found themselves teleported elsewhere within the tower. Upon regaining his bearings, he queried their new location. Mana and Yuri, the mid-boss room. Nagishi's shout of disbelief echoed through the space, prompting him to call out Nagishi's name in confusion. Nagishi, stricken with horror, revealed he had felt this ominous atmosphere only once before. Asked to specify their whereabouts, Nagishi disclosed they were on the magic tower's top floor as a purple magic power circle formed in front of them. A man of imposing stature appeared seated upon a throne, signaling to everyone, as Nagishi pointed out, that they had inadvertently entered the boss room. End of part 1 to 8. Please subscribe, like and comment your thought and suggestions. See you on the next upload.